Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our global audience, depending on wherever you're joining from. On behalf of the World Forum for Ethics in Business, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the biggest global summit of the year. The topic this year is Changing Paradigms in a Pandemic World, How to Regain Trust. The World Forum for Ethics in Business is a public interest foundation registered in Belgium. The mandate of the forum includes all manner of pursuing and establishing the indispensable ethical foundations of business in a globalized world. I'm really excited about the session today. Our topic today for this panel is well-being in tech world, now and post-pandemic. And we have a great collection of thought leaders in this space assembled, and I'm looking forward to an engaging and fun conversation with all of you. I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Rajneesh Gupta. I am passionate about well-being and I've been meditating for over 20 years very regularly. Professionally, I work for Intuit as their Global Vice President for Strategic Partnerships. So I'll start by introducing the great panel that we have here, starting with Rahul Tripathi. Rahul is the CTO and VP / General Manager for Nutanix. He's also a very well-known and well-recognized thought leader in the industry and has several patents under his belt. So we welcome Rahul. Rahul, if you'd like to add anything to your introduction, and also please share with the group, what does well-being mean to you personally?
Yeah, I think besides professionally, I'm the father of two young adults, one in high school, one in college, and both have been camping with us for the last year. So you can imagine that has been the primary driver of our life in this pandemic world. And what it means to me is it's the holistic wellness about not only your personal but professional life all coming together. And in this pandemic world, it has indeed come together. So my kids keep on joking with me that you seem to be enjoying this pandemic world, because literally I was on the plane, whatever, 200 days in a year, and now not having to travel and still being able to do what you do. That's been actually pretty exciting personally for me. So secretly I have enjoyed the stay at home work scenario.
Thank you for sharing that, Rahul. I can certainly relate to not having to travel, given that I used to travel quite a bit before the pandemic as well. Next, I'll introduce Ekta Chopra. She is the Chief Digital Officer for Elf Beauty, and she is very active in volunteering for not-for-profits, and also is a member of many Silicon Valley CIO and CTO groups. Welcome, Ekta. If you want to add anything, please do. And also please share what wellness or well-being means to you personally.
Hi, well, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on this. Well-being, I think, it's about, especially for me, what I've learned is it's about putting a mask on myself, because if I don't breathe, I can't help or do anything for anyone. And it's really important to me because I really, I'm very close to my family, my mom, my brother, my sister, everyone is around me, and I want to make sure that I'm there for them. And this is what the pandemic has really taught me, is health is at the center of everything, and your health, because if you can take care of yourself, that's the only way you'll take care of the people that you care for and love. So I would say it's just like, what Rahul said, secretly, pandemic has been a blessing for me. I've really got to spend a lot of time with my daughter. So yeah, that's what well-being means to me.
Very good, Ekta. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Samir Kumar next. Samir is the Vice President at Amazon, and he's responsible for Amazon's expansion and export business. He's been with Amazon for a very long time, since 1999, and has worked across several geographies for Amazon, including India, China, and USA. Samir, what does well-being mean to you personally? And if you'd like to add anything else to your introduction.
Thank you, Rajneesh, for having me here. Glad to be here and talking about this topic of well-being. For me personally, well-being means like a combination of few things. It's not just physical, it's also mental and emotional well-being. And it's a balance of those three things, right? Like you cannot just be well without having the mental peace as well as being emotionally sound. So, and as Ekta called out, relations are very important. Like loneliness was one of the things that we talk about a lot. So for me, building those relationships back, being physically fit and healthy, and as well, both at work, at home, is very important. And what we call, like, we don't call at Amazon work-life balance, we call it work-life harmony, because we believe it's kind of a virtuous cycle. If you are happy at work, you'll take that happiness home. And if you're happy at home, you bring that back to work as well. And I think pandemic has kind of blurred that line between work and life. And getting some of that balance back was very important for me as personally. And I echo what Rahul and Ekta both said, like getting closer to family, having kids at home. My college going daughter was here for a while with us. So I was glad to have that. But I do miss the travel piece a bit now.
Thank you, Samir. I love the notion of work-life harmony. That's a great way to think about things. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to next introduce Madhvi Bassin. Madhvi, welcome to the session. Madhvi leads diversity, inclusion, and belonging at Okta. And I've heard that she's a passionate meditator herself, so we are looking forward to hearing about her meditation experiences as well. Madhvi, what does well-being mean to you personally?
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Rajneesh. Thanks, everyone, for having us here. Well-being to me, a couple of things. Personally, well-being to me is, I'm going to repeat a lot of what the panelists have said, but to me, it means that the balance of what your mental, emotional, psychological, and physical well-being is, all of that coming together is to me like the ideal state, but we all strive to have that balance. I think that's where a lot of our effort goes in, of how do we strike a balance between these different aspects. And I also look at well-being in a very different way because of the job that I have, which is to create more spaces for people in my company across in the community where they can bring their authentic selves, feel that psychological safety so that they don't have to put a mask on of who I am, because that causes that extra emotional anxiety and stress. So for me, well-being professionally means creating more spaces where people don't have to take on that additional psychological burden of being stressed, of being like, do I belong here, of feeling alienated. It's creating spaces where everybody feels included. So that's part of like being your authentic self is such an integral part of your psychological well-being. And that's where a lot of my work and professional and personal experiences come in. In terms of meditation, as Rajni said, I think I have lost count, but I've been meditating, I think, I don't know what, like 20, 17 years, I don't know. And that has been a very core part of who I am. And I think, especially in these pandemic times, it's something that keeps you grounded, something that gives you the perspective. Not that you're going to change any challenges, you have to still go through the challenges, but it gives you the right perspective to move through it without causing a lot of anxiety for yourself and for people around. So that's what basically well-being and I would say mental health implies for me.
Thank you, Madhvi. It's interesting to hear all of you talk about well-being more holistically. You know, a lot of times one would think of well-being as a physical well-being, or sometimes we may think of it as mental well-being, but so many different aspects you guys brought about this: physical well-being, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, psychological well-being. There's so many aspects to well-being. And as like Madhvi was pointing out, there is a balance across this, which is what we need to seek, which gives us a psychological safety net. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and hopefully we can unpack these notions a little bit more. We're also going to be talking about the pandemic. So before we dive into your organizations, your teams, you know, I'd love to hear from you personally. You know, pandemic has affected all of us in many different ways, some positive, as some of you guys were highlighting, lack of travel, more time with family, but then there are also some challenging aspects. So for your personal well-being during these very interesting times, what strategies are you applying? What are you doing? And I'm going to start with Ekta, and then others can chime in, please.
Yeah. I think, you know, once again, there's the sort of the pandemic impact at work, being in a position where you're leading a large team that's totally distributed. I think it's been about building those connections, being there for my team, and really sort of just checking in on them. How are you doing? How are things going? Because the lines of work and sort of home life have, really blurred now. So that's one aspect. Personally, I think, as I said, like my husband worked from home. I was always traveling. And this is the closest I've been to my 6-year-old daughter. And it's been sort of the most beautiful thing in the world for me. I started painting with her. I have paintings on the wall all over the house that we did together. I didn't know she was such an amazing artist. And I just learned that. And it's just been such a joy of my life. And coming out of the pandemic, I want to understand, how do I continue that balance where I do get to spend this beautiful time with her that's not going to come back, after this age is gone. So I think it's really important that, I carry some of those learnings as I go back into the world. I don't know if I call that the normal world, but the post-pandemic like world. How do I take some of those things and continue those good things on? And really, spend time with my daughter too, while I'm working.
Yeah, that's such an amazing notion, Ekta. Being able to spend time with the family helps us deal with whatever may be going on in our lives. And that's the importance of relationships. Yeah, yeah.
If I may add there, like I really love that story that Ikta talked about being close to daughter, and same thing happened to me as well. My daughter came home from college. I had missed out a year with her because I was in India and she had to come back to US for her high school. So me and my wife always discuss, we got that year back with her. So that's plus. But as the pandemic started, one of the key things that I noticed was that the blur between the work and life. And we say at Amazon, if you give a minute, it'll take it, right? So Amazon keeps you busy all the time. So I started working quite a bit more than I was supposed to. And also my physical health was going down because of all the stress and anxiety. So one of the first thing I did was stop watching news and website on COVID. I had built a spreadsheet for following, which used to update automatically about number of cases and number of deaths. One of the things that I stopped doing first thing was get away from that. And other thing I realized to bring back work-life balance was to basically start exercising. One of the first thing happened was you stop commuting. So I got that hour back in the morning where you're not traveling to your workplace. And I used to not like that because you're stuck in traffic jam of Seattle sitting there. And I also at the same time didn't like exercising. So I said, why don't I turn on my NPR channel and get on my exercise bike or elliptical and listen to my radio and think about I'm commuting to work. And that's what I did. And that became a habit. And for the past year, one of the best things that has happened to me is that I am exercising 6 days a week. I am taking care of my food habits. I'm not eating out as much, so eating healthy. And that physical health has helped me improve my even emotional well-being, so that having that work-life harmony back, as well as taking care of my physical health and getting into some of the hobby has been some of those things that has helped me. At the same time, some of the anxieties and some of the other things have been the negative factor. I believe that we are getting into a new normal, as whatever Ekta called that, what will the normal be? But some of the things that I'll take away and continue to carry is managing that balance between physical, emotional, as well as the mental well-being. So that's my story in the pandemic.
Thank you, Samir. So many great nuggets there. Yeah. Madhvi, Rahul, you want to add anything there?
I can definitely jump in. I think my realization during the pandemic has been first grade school is much more difficult than my day job. I just think like I used to think, oh my God, my job is so difficult. I have realized first grade is even more difficult. So this is part of me with me in one room on my Zoom calls and my 7-year-old in his room with his Zoom calls, which has been like, I think they're getting balanced. A lot of my meditations have not helped. There has been a lot of anxiety, especially at the start of the pandemic. I think I have definitely enjoyed spending time with me, but I have a hyperactive 7-year-old. Getting him to sit on a Zoom call is challenging. And my biggest piece is like, I know we have gotten so much time, as everybody said, which I've loved to spend with our kids, but my heart really goes out for these kids. They were not wired to study on Zoom and socialize on Zoom. And from where I come, I've seen so many working moms and parents like struggle with that. So that had definitely been a very steep adaptation curve for me. Like I literally had to like step back and think through of like, how do I really want to approach this without like me losing my sanity? It was to a point of like, how do I balance these things? So that has obviously given me a little bit of a pause of like, let's reprioritize what's important. Like, it's not like he needs to be perfect. I know Ekta's quote behind her says it all, but it's a little bit of like, what do you give and take? Because this pandemic, like none of us were prepared for this. None of us knew what like the playbook is. So I think it's a lot of lessons in learning how to reprioritize. What do you give? What do you take? And what do you settle for, which is less than perfect at this point? Because there was a point where it was just a question of like survival. Let's just get through this. But kids were still on Zoom. They were still like had to get stuff done. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway is a little bit of reprioritization and changing my lens on. I've always been an A-type student. I want kid to be that, but it has really given me a pause of what it implies and what it means, and what do I want to prioritize when life is full of so much anxiety. It's a lot of, like, as we said, a lot of my sanity and my mental health. So that's definitely being primary for me. And before I turn it over to Rahul, I just want to make a point about, we all have talked so much about families and kids being so central and important to how we have navigated this pandemic life. In my job and my profession, I get to interact with a lot of people who face different challenges in what they are doing. I also want to bring out, like, there is a huge segment of the population who don't have this joy. There are a lot of people who are still single. And I have heard and been part of those groups and conversations where they really feel this pandemic has impacted them so much in terms of how isolated they feel. So I really think, despite of all the challenges we face, we have that blessing. And it's important to keep in mind that a lot of people even don't have that relationship and that family and that safety net, and now minus like the social interaction. So this is so much more difficult for many people around us.
Yeah, I think not only the social interaction, but all of us belong to the tech world. And I think, to put it in perspective, we are blessed to be even working and continuing to do what we do. So I think minus the social connection, which is somewhat missing now because you get into a meeting, get your work done and move. I think that's the biggest thing on the professional side. And some of the things we thought about was the psychological safety that Madhvi, you talked about, right? It's okay to show up on a video call with like whatever dress you are in. So actually I've been wearing this, I've worn this shirt after like so many months because I just got tired of wearing t-shirts. And I would go in a 7 a.m. meeting and turn on and I'm almost like in my half nightwear kind of clothes. And that gives psychological safety to people. It's okay to just show up however you are and kind of talk through it, and also letting people slack a little bit, because this is not the time when people have to burn the candle on both ends, because they are, right? If we have hired the right people, they are actually doing that. So it's the other way around. Okay. So I think that's somehow on the professional side. And on the personal side, what worked for me personally is taking a little bit of break. So instead of 30 minutes, 25-minute meetings and just 5 minutes, just go out, take a break, do a little bit of breathing. And I think what Ekta, you, Madhvi said, I think breathing meditation has been very, very helpful. And for me personally, cooking has been a great thing for me, right? With my boys, kind of just cooking and making a dish together. That's been a great stress reliever.
Well said, Rahul. You know, my wife jokes with me. She says that when I cook, it's a stress buster for me, but it's a stress creator for the rest of the family. So we've decided to let it go. But thank you for sharing all your thoughts. And you guys are obviously very much focused on well-being and lots of interesting strategies, from spending time with the family to cooking to just taking a pause. Lots of interesting things I've heard. Now, when I talk to some of my team members and friends, a lot of people think of well-being as something that is personal. It's a personal development tool, which it certainly is. But very few people realize that it's equally important in professional life. It's really hard to be successful professionally if one is not focused on personal life, personal well-being. So I'd love to hear from you as you think about your own focus on well-being. How does it help you in your professional life? And I'll start with Madhvi here.
That's very interesting because I very strongly believe in this, and this is what I advocate for every company, every group that I've worked with. You don't leave your personality and your personal self at the door. It's not like, I'm walking into my office virtually now, I badge in and I've left my personality and who I am as a person at the door. And now I'm just like the professional self. So that's kind of very important to understand that you hire a person, it's a package. You don't just hire someone's professional side and then let alone the personal piece. So if you're leaders, you have to understand that it comes as a package. So you have to deal with it as a package. You can't say like, don't bring your personal stress to work. That's really not possible. That's not going to happen. For me, how that helps is a lot of what I do is making sure that I'm creating processes and spaces, as I said, where people can feel included, where people can bring their best selves. And that's not always the case. People have a lot of anxiety. People have a lot of concerns. There are a lot of issues. If I'm not showing up as calm and centered, I'm not going to help anybody in that situation. Usually, a lot of people who come to me are trying to understand how to navigate through certain problems and certain issues. If I'm caught up in a lot of my own anxiety and not like centered, then I'm not bringing any value to what I'm trying to do. And a lot of what I do is change management. And for change management, you have to make sure that you are presenting a case to someone where they feel that they are part of the change. So that all comes from the fact that you yourself are centered, you are able to see different perspectives. And that can only come with, as I said, when you're emotionally and psychologically more balanced and centered. So I definitely feel, sometimes my mom jokes that I studied international relations and I'm not using any of it in my job. I was like, I don't need that school education in my job. I use my everyday meditation and I bring it to every single meeting that I have. Because if I'm not calm and centered and balanced, I cannot do my job. So for me, it's more critical than the education that I got, the fact that I have these practices to lean back on and that bring it back to the whole community in the form of how I show up. So it's super critical in terms of how successful or not successful I am in what I'm doing.
That's amazing to hear, Madhvi. And given your passion and experience with meditation and what it brings to you for your own professional life, have you tried to bring it to your teams and your organization, and any experiences you can share there?
Oh, definitely. Oh my God. From a small to big organization wherever I've been, I still remember my first job in the US where I wasn't sure like how people would react to the meditation. I started like a team meditation at Thursday at 11. I don't know why, but that's been my standard. And I still do that with a lot of my team members. And we, especially at Okta, have like, mental health as one of the primary pillars. So we do have like, every employee at Okta can access like a meditation session one-on-one. And we have a lot of like mental health support sessions. And I definitely bring a lot of that to my team as well. And it just helps, it breaks down that barrier of like, as I said, like the professional and personal, because you bring it into that space where you're like, you as a leader are creating that space and sending the message that it's okay to have some anxiety, to be anxious, but there are practices that can help you. So it has definitely helped me bond so much with my team. And then everybody knows, why do I have a block on my calendar for like, my meditation, and people respect that a lot. So it does help send a message to your wider team and makes that part of that culture where this is normalized rather than being an exception.
Yeah, and like you said, when leaders commit to it, then that's where the culture flows and team feels more open to it. Anybody else have experience with meditation, similar practices at work? Samir, I see you raising your hand.
I think it's not just meditation. I want to just agree with Madhvi, what she said around what you do. You cannot separate out work and life. It's sometimes they just blend into each other, even when we are not in pandemic. So as I talked about the harmony that you need to maintain, and you need to be authentic. And authenticity doesn't go, you just don't put on a face when you get to work. So it's very important to be authentic. So if you are stressed out at home, you'll take that stress to work. And what pandemic has shown is that mindfulness, we sit in reviews throughout the day, and if you are not present, if you're not mindful, then you won't have a good review. Your team will notice that. So it's very important to be present and be mindful, and that connection is very important, like with what you do at work and what you do in life. And I have personally believed, and I heard it somewhere, that leadership is a contact sport. So pandemic has sort of, like, you cannot be in contact. So I used to lead by, hey, talking to people, going to their desk. That is not there, but that contact has to be maintained somehow. So we do it now over Chime and Zoom, or any other mechanisms we have. But it's very, very important for me to be leading with empathy. And that only happens when I'm mindful, when I'm well, and I'm thinking right. And that's where, like, if you are well at home, you'll be well at work. So that's what you bring in your professional life on any given day. So whether it's meditation, or whether it's you are having a cup of tea with your wife in the morning that makes you happy, whatever it takes, like, you need to be present and mindful. That's what I believe you need to bring to your professional life as well.
And just to add to that, so in our case, we have a global workforce, and we poll these people, do the pulse survey every quarter. And over the pandemic, quarter over quarter, we could see that basically the work-life balance is getting out. And I think Madhvi said work-life harmony. I agree with that. And interestingly, what you find is when you start asking people, what are the issues? Across the world, there are different kind of issues. Like in several, whether it is India, whether it's Serbia, what we found was just people stuck at home with basically a lot of the family around them not having enough space to work, right, was the issue. People with young families where both parents are working, with the young kids and school happening and somebody helping the kids with the Zoom, that was an issue, right? So there are different kind of issues that are surfacing, and there is no one answer to it. You can't just say, here is what you do, and you can't give them a technical training or a soft skill training to make it happen. So what we thought was the only thing that can help them is they can have internal mechanism to figure it out. So actually at Mechanics, we rolled out these breath and meditation workshops, and then we offered them to people. And it was interesting to see that how many people across the world actually opted to take some time off their hours and just do it. And then we did one for executives as well. And then our CEO and our head of HR, everybody joined in. And the funny thing was, when we did a debrief, it was like, we couldn't believe you could slow down that much, because you were spending so much time during the day, 100 miles an hour, and then you came in and your space in 15, 20 minutes, you were like totally centered. And I think that emanates, if the leadership really believes in it, follows it, then it really emanates to people around you. And then if everybody is calm, right, things work much better. You can't just create more stress in a stressy situation. You're not going to get anywhere. So that's what some of the coping mechanisms, so those mechanisms exist. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, we have all relied on hard skill training and train people on having difficult conversations and train people on the technology. But we have not really prioritized training people on how to handle themselves, their mind, their stress. And I think that's one of the ways to do it.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah. Samir, I wanted to pick on something you mentioned, and you talked about the importance of for leaders to be present. It's much easier to be present in an office situation where you're always there, and then somebody walks into your room and you can give them your full attention. In the pandemic world, it's much harder, and people may not feel that comfortable just giving you a phone call or finding time with you. So what can a leader do in this world to be more present and also to be more conscious of their employee well-being?
I think it starts with, first of all, acknowledging that you need to be there for them. So one of the things that used to happen, and it happened to me as well, is that I never had a kind of a dedicated one-on-one with my boss, because I could walk in and get a 5-minute time with him at any time. And that move went away for me. And I realized that within a few months in the pandemic, that not only I need to build that connection with my manager, but I also need to do the same thing with my rest of my team. The good thing about my team was I already had 3 of my directs who were around the world. So I had to have the remote connectivity, but I had to build that with rest of the team. So having more contact, as I said, like whether it's through a Slack message in a day or through a quick call with your team or a quick call with a direct and asking how you are doing or just saying good morning to the team. Uh, and be responsive in email as well. If somebody is celebrating something, we launch something, be there, be present for them is important. And it's not the same as in the physical world where you can go walk to somebody and say thank you, but it's very important to give that gratitude. And we are all very thankful, as Rahul said, that somebody said that, especially us, like Amazon, we've been lucky. We work in kind of the vaccine or therapy industry for the rest of the world for during the pandemic, because we're on the front line serving customers. Uh, and we are very lucky to have our job and thankful that we are still growing the business. So, but still with that, the anxiety at work, at home, school, all of those were impacting the team. So being present for them, being ready to listen to the team, and wherever possible saying thank you and was very important. So those are some of the mechanisms that we have built, but there's more to do. There's more to do. And I want to go back to one of the Rahul said, that surveys and listening to your team. One of the mechanisms we have at Amazon, we don't do quarterly survey. We have a question that we ask the entire Amazon every day, one simple question. Like it pops up on your screen when you log into your Amazon account first thing in the morning. Everybody at Amazon gets that one question. And it's about either about something about work or well-being or how you're doing. It's kind of like when you get a package from Amazon, you get how am I doing, or did I satisfy you, yes or no question. It's similar to that. So you very quickly get out of the way. You get in and get out. But it's very impactful because over time you can see the trend in the organization. So it's not like it's a continuous process. And that has been a very helpful tool for us, even during the pandemic. We could see the trend in the organization. And at times you can cater the question to your organization and see how they are doing, but it's a daily thing. So that one mechanism has also worked quite well for us.
That's amazing. You know, Amazon's always in many of these dimensions at the cutting edge of how things are done. And I love the idea of just doing a quick question so you can get a pulse of the organization real time and not on a quarterly basis, but on a daily basis. That's an amazing thought. Yeah. Now, we started talking about our organizations and our teams, and obviously the pandemic has not only affected us, but has affected our teams, has affected our organizations. What changes do you observe in your employee well-being the most? What changes are most noticeable for you? And maybe we'll start with you, Ekta, this time.
Yeah, I think, pandemic has impacted everyone differently. Singles, parents, whether it be, so in the biggest change that I've seen in my team was mostly remote. They're, all around sort of US, they're in India, they're sort of all over the place. And it was always remote in some cases. For them, it was not a big change, but the positive change was they got to interact with the company a lot more than they ever did before. So like one of my QA engineers who lives under the, stone or whatever you call it, rock, and he never interacted with anyone, all of a sudden was the most chatty person on our town halls, and he would be like, so chatty. And I was like, wow, he felt so engaged, more engaged with the team than he ever did before. And I think that's why I say that it impacted people differently around, in many different ways. We as a company also instituted a bi-weekly town hall with the whole company. Everyone just shows up and we start our meetings with meditations, and it's like 5 minutes. That's it. Breathing exercise. That's all you do. And it's led by two of the people who are actual yoga teachers in like as a practice. And they just, sort of lead this meditation. So one other change that we instituted is, every leader in the company has to host some sort of a mindfulness exercise. It could be anything. It could be painting, it could be breathing, whatever you're comfortable with, even post-pandemic, because it's a real deal. Like mental well-being is a real deal. And the impacts of what's happening right now are actually going to carry over in several years from now, right? Like on your kids, on your families and so forth. So how do you maintain that connectivity regardless of what's happening in the world around you? So I'd say those are the changes that I'm seeing, that some people are more connected. There's been some positive things, there's been some impactful things, but yeah, so those are the major changes that
Oh,
I'm
very
seeing.
interesting, Ekta. And I'm particularly intrigued with the notion of having uh, mandated almost for all the leaders to hold some sort of mindful sessions with their teams. I assume they happen online. And how
Mhm.
do you manage participation? Is it required for everybody to join, or is it opt-in? And what have you seen around people's participation?
Yeah, it's definitely opt-in, because it's sometimes you do these happy hours and you think people want to join in. No, they don't. Sometimes they're like, leave me alone. I get this half an hour of time where I can just focus and do nothing. So I think it's definitely opt-in. So we have a Slack group. It's very organic. I love cooking, by the way, Rahul. Like that's like my just de-stressor. When I cook, I'm creative, because at heart I'm a poet, and so it just feels like such a creative thing for me, and it de-stresses everything. So I host like cooking classes. I'll be like, I'm cooking up a awesome butter chicken recipe if you guys want to chime in or something. So I think it's a very much an opt-in. Every leader is doing different things. Some are doing breathing exercises, some are doing just like HIIT classes on Zoom, some are doing even laughter exercises like, hey, just do like some sort of stand-up comedy or something if somebody has a talent. So it is very much about opt-in. If you have time, take advantage of this, because it's going to help you just relax and not think about work.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any changes you're noticing in employee well-being that is worth highlighting?
Yeah, I think I will add that the social connection is the biggest missing part right now, especially, and there are several people who have joined during the pandemic. They have never seen their colleagues.
Yeah.
And then we used to have these in-person events where you'll meet, so you will get to see the whole self. Like Madhvi had said, the whole self, and then that you don't see anymore. So we had to replicate mechanisms to build the social connections. And one thing we realized, there's no one size fits all. Some people love the happy hour, some people just don't want to stay out of it. So I think, and we had to create wellness days. Sometimes people I just want a day off. That's it, right? So we had to create wellness days. You take some time off. And then some of the things that really I think worked were, we created a monthly celebration of all the people that had their anniversaries in that month. And that meeting is all about celebrating you, and you don't talk work. And all you talk about is your favorite moment at work, something about yourself that nobody knows. And it's all about you. And interestingly, there we learned stories like somebody really grows heirloom tomatoes like nobody else. There is a lady in our team who got stranded in Aruba and had to be like, there's a GoFundMe campaign to bring her back. So these kind of stories you never hear, and that really builds connections amongst people. So I think that's the really tough part. How do you get that going? And there's some success and some still work to do, a lot more work to do that in that area.
Very much so. Rahul, that reminded me of something that I did with my team, which was very well received. One of the things we did was to learn better about each other. We asked everybody to bring a picture that best describes their childhood. And one particular individual, he bought a picture which was just black. There was nothing on the picture. And he said, when I grew up in a very small place where there was no power at all. And it used to be cold winters and it used to be dark all the time. It's like when I think about my childhood, that is what I remember. It was such an interesting thing for everybody to learn. Yeah. We've been talking about the pandemic, and a lot of times it brought about, you guys shared that it doesn't affect everybody equally. And, Madhvi was talking about how singles may be more impacted because they miss the social connection a lot more. They don't have a family or kids to hang on to. Another group that has been very significantly impacted, especially in work situations, is women. if you read a lot of literature, you would see that the layoffs are just the effect on ratings, etc. For women has been much more pronounced than has been for males. So I'd love to hear from you, and maybe Madhvi, we could start with you here. What are you observing as it relates to the effect of pandemic for women employees?
Oh, it's huge. I think you are very right in saying that, Rajesh. Like if you look at a lot of research right now, it has impacted everybody, but in terms of women and working mothers, it has definitely impacted them disproportionately. And I come from the space of diversity and inclusion and building the women in the workforce. I just like there has been so much research, and we strongly believe we have moved back like 5 to 7 years in terms of women's participation in the workforce. So that's a big thing. A lot of women are out of the workforce right now, given the pandemic, whether it was due to layoffs or whether if you made the choice like you need to support your kids, they're not going to school, they're not going to daycare. What do you need to do? So bringing that workforce back in is going to be a challenge. I think the industry numbers also in tech have taken a step back. That's one piece of the challenge, which we have to be very mindful of when we move forward. But the other piece of the challenge is the women who are in the workforce right now. Like they are beyond exhausted. Like I know we just had International Women's Month and History Month, and we had International Women's Day. And I was kind of a little taken aback when I realized the theme for the International Women's Day this year was like, I choose to challenge. And I was like, I don't choose to challenge. I don't have the energy to challenge. Like, don't ask me after 1 year of pandemic with like being a working mom, you want me to challenge the status quo? I was like, I have zero energy. If you are an ally, step up and say like, this is a year for women to rest. Take a step back, and the system and your allies and everybody will make sure that we support you. This is a time to support more women. If you have them as team members, if you have them as leaders, create the space so that you can support them and rather than expecting like, oh, you are like, I really don't write this judgment. Oh, you're an amazing working mom. I'm like, you don't know. I'm like right now exhausted. I'm an exhausted working mom. Don't put additional pressure on me by saying you're such an amazing mom, because that also comes with some judgment of like, you want me to be amazing. I'm like, why do I need to be amazing? Like, kind of the system, can't like this support network be amazing? I would rather prefer being an average mom with an amazing support structure. Can we build that for women? So to me, it has impacted them a lot. And I sometimes also feel like we all are getting ready for the post-pandemic world. In my mind, that shot in your arm will not come with any degree of rest for the moms who are exhausted. What are we doing for that? Like we talk so much about the mental well-being. Are we building anything so that the moms can regain a lot of their like stress? So to me, I just feel like there needs to be some kind of like a concerted effort to make sure that once we reopen and go back to the normal, like everything is normal. Like, did you even address everything that the mothers had gone through? Like, what are we doing for that? So to me, that is a real conversation that you need to have. And I just want to wrap up this section by saying, like, if you know of a female who has been promoted this year, please give her additional kudos, because she has done this in addition to all the stress and the anxiety. So my heart really goes out to any female or working mom who has received any kind of promotion, any kind of merit increase in a pandemic. Give yourselves a pat and take some time off and rest. You truly, truly deserve it.
Very well said, Madhvi. And
Thank you,
just this
Madhuri.
notion of
Yeah.
wanting, providing some rest, and not we live in a very type A type of society where only effort is awarded, and sometimes one has to just move slow to move fast, if you will. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. I know
No,
all
no,
of
no.
you wanted to add your
I was
thoughts.
going to reflect on like that was very passionate and very it touched my heart. But I have two anecdotes on my working career. Like one is from the work, which is basically I was having a conversation pre-pandemic with one of a women colleague who works for me, and she was going on a trip to China. I had asked her to go to do something in China. And she talked to me that she was leaving 3 days later, but she was preparing for that now because she was making lunch and dinner and putting in the refrigerator for her kids and the father. And then she was talking about, here are the 7 things that she need to take care of, who will drive the kid to a school and then bring the kid back. And I was just trying to remember that I also go on a trip, and I basically 30 minutes before the trip, I go pack up my bag and leave in my car. And that was one of the key revelation for me at that point, that look, there is more than, like, we have a good support system, and what Madhvi said, that supporting women at work and women in our life is so important for all of us. So that's my first anecdote, and I took that and I wrote a little bit about that in the LinkedIn as well. But I take that as women needs to be supported. And this, my second anecdote is during pandemic. You come home and my wife, she's a homemaker. But at the same time, she sacrificed so much for us during the pandemic, because this room that I'm sitting in, this is her meditation puja room. And I took it over because it became my office. My daughter came back from college and she took her room back, which was kind of her work area, my wife's work area. She gave that up. She had her free time during the day, and now she was taking care of the entire family. And I started to relate that she's a homemaker. Imagine a working mom in that situation. And so I completely agree, giving kudos to all the women that are working for us and working with us. It's going to be very important. And especially during this performance review cycle that we are going through, being aware of that and taking care of that will be very important for all of us. And it's just not, pandemic is just an event. And I agree with Madhvi that we need to do that on a continuous basis. It's not a thing that's going to just, pandemic is going to do that. Doing that going forward, or even looking back at it, learning from our previous experience, is going to be very important for all of us. If you want to build a diverse, inclusive, and equal world, that's going to be very important for all of us.
Thanks, Samir. What a powerful story. Sorry, Rahul, you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one thing I seen work, and I think I totally agree with Madhvi that it's all about creating that support system. And one of my colleagues, they have young children, both of them are working, and they created this kind of timetable amongst themselves. So basically 9 to 11 is one person, 11 to 1. And this person then just blocked off his calendar, right? And then whatever meeting is, and then if the boundaries were created and we supported it, and I think it just, we could make it work. So the point is, I think we have to be able to create those boundaries, right? And for some reason, women to feel pressured that to perform, they have to be master of all respects, is actually putting too much pressure on them, right? So I think as an organization, we need to create that psychological safety again to really be able to do, yeah, it's fine if you have to take 2 hours, and then, or if in those 2 hours or whatever, kids are coming in to the Zoom calls, and so be it, right? That's fine. So I think it's a really tough topic, and I don't think there are really simple answers there. It's part of it is like easing on the part of organization, part of easing on part of the leaders, and part of it is easing on the part of women themselves, that it's okay if you are a strong leader, it's okay to be vulnerable and share that this is not working for me, right? I think it goes on all sides of the equation, and clearly a big challenge. Yeah.
If I may just add, like, first of all, Madhvi's letter was very inspirational. And I told her even that it really is about, I didn't choose to challenge either because I was like, I am so exhausted in my mind right now that I don't have time to fight anything. I'm just going to do my best. And it's okay if things are not perfect. And that's why I love this quote. But what I'll say personally for me, my husband is my partner in crime. Like, he is the most wonderful partner anybody could ever ask for. Like, in this pandemic, I didn't feel like I was all alone in it. I had to prepare lunch, I had to prepare dinner, I had to do this for my daughter. He just was there in anything that I needed. So I think that really helps when you have a support system just at home, which starts with your family, whether you're married or unmarried. And, having that support system was my biggest thing that I could have ever asked for survival during pandemic. And I think, at workplace, I created sort of this small work group of women, and it was all about, hey, this is a 30-minute session. Just come and just like say whatever you want, like whatever. And it could be like, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, whatever it is, just vent. This is a venting session. And I think that really, really helped, because these women just didn't even have the space to go and breathe sometimes in the day. So it allowed them to just do that. So my team personally, we just created the space for just women. And we were like, just come in and talk, say whatever you want, no judgments, whatever you want. So, but personally, like, I feel like my journey was easier because my husband was like right next to me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Ekta, for sharing that. Madhvi was previously talking about psychological safety, and I see your initiative of just creating a safe space for women to come together and talk. That gives the psychological safety and comfort that somebody is willing to hear me and relate to what I'm saying. So thank you and all the anecdotes were really, really inspiring. I'm going to move us along. We are a little short on time, and I did want to touch on the future. Madhvi was already talking about we're going to get a shot in the arm, many of us already on the way. Now, as you think about the future, when we put the pandemic behind us, do you think the workplaces, and as it relates to well-being in the workplace, would be the same? If not, what changes do you think we would experience going forward? I'm going to start with Rahul.
Maybe I can yeah. So I think some things, so we have a habit of snapping back very quickly. So if, in my view, once things go back, it'll be a little bit of a lull, and then we will just be back in our commute and going back to this and back-to-back meetings and all that stuff. So I think that'll come back, but this time around, people come with a different perspective. One, they come with a solid perspective on the importance of family life, importance of self, importance of well-being, and all the tricks of the trade they have learned along the way to cope. Right? I think they will probably stay more than the usual corporate things around. You have massages, you have all. So I think this should really help people reinforce the value of taking care of yourself, and only you can do it. Nobody around you can do it. So I think that'll happen. Some of the stuff around, I think the flexible workplace to really reduce some stress. Everybody remote being on the same footing. Maybe we'll go back to once a day, meet in person, but the rest is all flexible because people realize. And I think the third biggest thing in my mind would be probably flying into London for a 2-hour meeting, which you thought was the most important face-to-face meeting. And now everybody has realized, either your customer or yourself, no, it needn't be that way. You can still sit at home and do that 2-hour meeting. You don't have to spend 24 hours doing it. So that should ease the pain. And I think the value of family, and I've seen many people in my own organization now decide like somebody wants to move back to Australia because his wife has a 92-year-old mom, and they realize this is the time, this is the importance of the family. So I think that perspective will come in. So some of this thing will be underscored even more, but I'm afraid actually we may go back to the usual self if we are not very careful.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. I hear your comments as this good side of pandemic. There are good things that have come out of pandemic. There are bad things that have come out of pandemic. As we leave the pandemic behind us, the good things would likely continue, and the bad things we may leave behind. Anybody else wants to add any quick thoughts different from what Rahul shared?
I think I can just like expand on a couple of that. From where I sit, I definitely think one thing that has happened is we have normalized the conversation about mental health in the workplace. Like in terms of inclusion, we have been trying a lot to do that. It has always been considered this is the job of your benefits team and your D&I team. They talk about mental health. I'm like a tech leader, I'm a product leader, I don't talk about this. But I think that has changed. You have normalized the conversation about mental health, going back to Rahul's point. And the other piece is, I feel that the workplace will become more inclusive. You will not have, a lot of people were feeling like, they don't belong in the workplace. There was like, I'm short, I'm fat, I can't dress up. Like all those things have kind of gone away. It's become much more inclusive. But I also feel, going back to Rahul's point, the one challenge that I think might be a detriment to this is, right now it's a level playing field. Everybody is remote. So you don't have that meeting after the meeting happening because nobody is in the office. once that playing field changes, I'm a little skeptical that things might be like now some people are remote, some are not, like how those dynamics are being played out. That to me might have a different impact, but I definitely think in terms of being more inclusive and being more open, I don't think we can go back to exactly where we were. Perhaps it's not as open as now, but we'll not go back to just like shut off your mental health and be less inclusive. I think that's something to stay, and that I think we as leaders have to find creative ways so that we keep it alive. Because if we are not intentionally doing that, and if we fall back into our patterns, then it's not going to happen. So we should understand that we have the responsibility of keeping some of these good things, as you said, Rajneesh, because it's not going to happen on its own. So we have to put in that effort.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah,
Samir, you were going to add something.
I'll echo that it has to be intentional, because and you have to build mechanisms, and Rahul was talking about, and mechanisms are something that we talk about always, is complete process. You need to have basically good audit mechanism as well for your processes to ensure that they persist, because otherwise we'll revert back. So there is heightened awareness, there is that normalization that has happened, and we need to make sure what are the good things we can take away and sustain. The flexibility in workplace, ability to work remotely are some of the good things that we have. So we should look at what are the key things we can take away while maintaining well-being, like things like no meetings Friday, or having regular happy hours. It may become more social event, but at the same time, managing those and maintaining some of those good things that we have learned in the past year, and take those takeaway and make it intentional as leaders will help us.
Yeah. You know, I would love to continue this conversation forever, but seems like we are close to time. I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to first of all thank the four of you. Such an engaging and delightful conversation. I think it was Madhvi who started off by saying that, we want everybody to bring their whole self to work. I think we brought our whole self to this conversation. Lots of great insights and lots of thought-provoking thoughts for me. It's not an end, I would say. It's the end of a beginning. I think we made a great start today. Let's continue the conversation. The World Forum for Ethics in Business would love to continue to stay in touch with all of you. Also, this session, as you know, was live streamed on YouTube for everybody around the globe to watch. And then there's a Twitter handle as well. So please do continue to interact with the forum and this session, either on Twitter or on YouTube or any other social media handles of your choosing. Once again, thank you very much for joining the session, and hope you guys have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Signing off.
Rajneesh, for
Thank you,
hosting
Rajneesh.
us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Likewise.
Thank you.